very often the fight gets booked about a week ago and it ends up third on the main card. But coming up this weekend at featherweight, Nate the Trained Landwehr doesn't know a boring fight, and he's going to be taking on a guy whose nickname suggests the same thing in Lights Out Austin Lingo. Matt Lingo was due to be taking on Ricardo Ramos a couple of weeks ago. It was on the Jan Dwashvili card, and Ricardo Ramos showed up thinking it was lightweight, weighed 154 for 145, and Austin Lingo doesn't get a fight. And for Nate Landwehr, he was due the 15th ranked contender in this division. And Alex Caceres is out. Big Marcel reports it on Twitter that this is the fight they throw together, and I love it.
I love it, but I hate it for Austin Lingo with this respect. The guy he was getting ready for doesn't fight a lot like the guy he is now getting ready for. And I know Ramos is very talented. I'm not saying this to say he's not on the level, but that's a rangy striker who uses his jiu-jitsu, won't just walk forward and be the craziest man just to walk the face of the earth. So for Lingo, it is a little bit unfortunate that the camp probably won't carry over.
And we talked a lot about Austin Lingo in that fight against Ricardo Ramos, and there's so many things to kind of draw from. Texan finisher, lights out. Austin Lingo's been on the shelf for some time. We haven't seen Lingo since 2021. He made it close to the top of the mountain with the LFA. He's putting on great performances, and out of all the finishes that Lingo has, 5 of them in the first round. In the UFC, he lost a decision to Yusuf Salal a few years ago, and he picked up big wins over Jacob Kilburn and Luis Saldana. Knockdowns in both of those fights. It was the first round against Kilburn. It was the third round against Saldana, and I love to see those gritty fights like Lingo was in against Saldana, where he gets outstruck in the first round, he grits his teeth, he wins the second round, Saldana slows down in the third round, and what dropped Saldana in that third round? Switch levels, jab to the body, and Saldana's down. So a crazy performance from Lingo. I wish we got to see him in 2022. He had some injuries that he had to look after. He did an interview with, and I want to make sure that I get this one right, it was Low Kick MMA back in May of last year before his fight with David Onama. So he's supposed to fight in July. That the headline out of the interview was that was the last fight on his contract. So I would assume that this is the last fight on his contract, but I don't know for certain. So he said in the fight he was supposed to have against Jonathan Pierce, that would have been February of last year, that he tore possibly his meniscus right before that fight, so he had it worked on by the doctor. He was going to be good to go for Onama, but of course that fight fell out. So as you'll remember, Austin Lingo was due David Onama that summer, and listen, Lingo's out, so Onama waits on the shelf for about a month and takes a fight against Nate Landwehr. Matt, we talked about it earlier on. Steven Peterson fought Julian Erosa, possible fight of the year. Nate Landwehr fought David Onama, possible fight of the year. And in the first round of that fight, Onama had Landwehr dead to rights.
He did.
And then Landwehr rallied himself back in. It was an all-time slobber knocker of a match if Jim Ross had kind of a thought on it. But you really do like that win that Landwehr has. And when he came into the UFC, he was kind of a boogeyman because he fought over with M1 Global. And Nate Landwehr isn't like a Shavkat Rakhmonov from M1. But he's not necessarily like some of the other champs either. He's not an Alexander Volkov. He came in with a lot of fanfare, or some fanfare, fought Herbert Burns, and got knocked out in the first round of that fight. Then he fought Darren Elkins, and looked really good.
To be fair, though, I think it is okay to give ourselves some credit every now and then. We were saying what Nate Landwehr was before he came to the UFC. Like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And for Nate Landwehr, if you watched him leading up to the UFC, you kind of knew what you were going to get. Like, he has not changed himself whatsoever.
When you have an American that's brought in to fight fighters overseas and lose, and then they keep winning, and then the fighters keep getting more and more mad when they get beat, that embodies Nate Landwehr. Matt, I haven't done this in a little bit, but my record comp for this one, News of the World. You got this for me for Christmas a few years ago. People know Queen. People like Queen. But I think the song that embodies Nate Landwehr on this, and it's not the first two, We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions. It's the song called, at the end of the first side, The Fight from the Inside. Fight from the Inside. And why would I say fight from the inside? Because this guy, I think his organs are made of like metal gears, and he just grits down, bites down on the mouthpiece, and he makes it tough. Like his fight against Ludwig Klein. He's a pretty big underdog in that one. He goes out there, shows up, shows out, gets a submission win. And I know Klein's fight last weekend, it was what, a draw against Jai Herbert. Herbert's a pretty darn good fighter. Landwehr getting the finish in that one, showing us the blood and guts in his last fight against David Onama. Obviously, people are going to rate him very highly off of those fights, and you're going to somewhat underrate Austin Lingo because it's been such a a time that he's been away. But Lingo, he gets to sleep in his own bed. He's out of Dallas. He's going to be fighting in San Antonio, the Alamo City.
It's not always a great thing to be sleeping in your own bed, though. Derek Lewis has proved that.
Yeah, that's true. But
it does happen quite a bit.
The wins that he has, you talk about a guy biting down on the mouthpiece, that Luis Saldana first round, and then for him to come back, drop some with that jab in the third round. A lot of big positives to draw from both these guys. So, Landwehr is the favorite in the matchup by quite a significant margin. We have a look at the topology votes. Surprise to us there to you. I will say over-under in the matchup, 72.5% Nate Landwehr.
I think it'll be over.
I think they're going to be over, and they are significantly over. So only 490 votes, 90% Landwehr, 71% by decision. For the 11% that have Lingo, 66% by decision. And Austin Lingo is going to take on a whirling dervish, the Tasmanian
Certainly
devil.
was.
Ricardo Hamosh a couple of weeks ago. Hamosh missed the weight and flew back to Brazil. Sad. So in this matchup, Matt, Lingo, he walks guys down, implements his boxing combinations, throws good kicks. His wrestling's not a negative by any means. He had that great win over Yusuf Salal that was able to show us some of those talents. In a matchup like this, I do like Nate Landwehr ever so slightly, but when you get a couple of guys that are fight of the nights waiting to happen, it's always hard to try and make a really rock-solid prediction.
I've brought this up talking about Nate Landwehr before. I'm going to get oddly personal, but in a fun way. There was a point guard for this team in Heartland. He would run. And if you play basketball and you play against another point guard who would run, you know how much it sucks. Because, I shoot, right? I want to come off a screen, get wide open, take a three, and if I miss it, I can get back on defense easy. This guy would be really sweaty, get all over you, just be gross, and he'd run. Nate Landwehr's that guy. Now, to be fair, this guy busts my ass every time I ever played against him. He destroyed me because his style was like that. Nate Landwehr reminds me of this kid every time I see him fight, just because he is a bit of a tryhard, but I mean that in the best way positive. I know people say tryhard and they roll their eyes, but Nate Landwehr's not the type of guy who's going to give up on himself in a fight. Will he fight himself into bad positions sometimes? Yes, he will. Don't get me wrong, because that over-aggressiveness will get him caught. We've seen it happen many times before. If Herbert Burns can knock you out, then Austin Lingo can definitely have levels of success too, and doing it off the same things, off the aggressiveness of Landwehr. But I think Landwehr has learned a little bit off that performance. He's doing a better job at not getting his head in the waist area of his opponents. He gets into the chest more is what I've noticed, which does help him avoid some of the knees up the middle. Now, he still eats punches that are straight like there is no tomorrow, but I do like the small changes I've seen of Nate Landwehr.
To make the Canadian connection, some people don't like this, but it's like a B-dub-dubs fact if you want to share it with your friends. You look at Nate Landwehr's overall career arc, he was supposed to fight Gavin Tucker pre-UFC in Nova Scotia twice, and the fights did not materialize. Wow. Could you imagine? It would have blown the roof off of the Metro Center. Now it's a Scotiabank Arena. Matt, a big-time matchup coming up this weekend. Both of us going with the train. Nate Landwehr to bring the win back to Florida by way of Clarksville, Tennessee. It's a big-time fight on this card. Holm, Santos next. Main event, Vera taking on Sandhagen. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.